Ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Welcome, Mr. John Demicoli, the favourite of the Demicoli brothers, depending on who you ask.
Like, I was going to say that. I think you've never heard that I'm your favourite ever in my life.
I don't say you're my favourite.
Wow.
Like sentence structure.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Oh, my mum's favourite. Yes, correct. Correct.
You're the youngest.
Definitely.
Okay.
Don't tell Joe and Paul that.
No. So, for those people who don't know, you're one of the very famous Australian-wide, well-known brothers, the Demicolis, Paul, Joey, and John.
Yes.
You're the youngest.
Yes.
You're all involved in fight sports.
Amazingly, yes. It's all started. Actually, I think I started the whole thing. I'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later off air.
We can talk about it. It's all good.
Talk about it. So, Johnny, how did you get involved in fight sports first, and then how did you get involved in emceeing?
Fight sports. I suppose Paul and John Cheetah back in the day, back in the early 90s, were doing fight shows. I was a young tacker. Paul and Johnny met through me doing Thai at Johnny's gym. Joey was working with Johnny Cheetah. I was doing Taekwondo. And brother Joe goes, my mate at work has a Muay Thai gym. Why don't you go try it out? So Joe and Paul both took me. I trained. They were talking to Johnny and became friends. Paul and Johnny started doing shows. And as a little kid, I was there watching promoters do their job and how it all worked.
And you still wanted to be involved?
Yeah, it's crazy. Then I started working at the casino, and I was doing promotional hosting at the CAS, which involved microphone work. And one day I was at a Wayne at Joey's show, Joey and Johnny Cheetah's show, and their current MC at the time couldn't do it. So Joey said, "You're working." And I went, "Oh, am I?" So the following day I was out there MCing a fight show, and the rest is, I suppose, steamrolled.
What year was that?
That would have been about 2008, I reckon.
Yeah.
I think about 2008, 2009.
Wow.
Yeah, so done that show, and then the great man Michael Vukovic was there, and he said, "Do you want to do my show in like 2 weeks' time?" And then Michael Vukovic took me under his wing and let me do his show. I done literally his show only for the next 12 months.
Yeah.
And then got asked by a few other promoters. I tried to get my name out there, and so then that started. Now it's a regular occurrence, and every weekend I'm doing all formats, so which has been great.
Yeah. So as how old were you when you were doing Taekwondo?
Probably too long. Even if it was a year.
But how old were you?
I was in year, I'd say year 9. Year
Was that the first time you did year 9 or the second time? That's the thing.
I was definitely the tallest kid in year 9, but I was also 21 at the time. It was good.
Yeah. What was Johnny at that age, year 9, like? How would you describe yourself?
A kid that loved hip hop way too much. I went through all the really bad fads of hip hop. I wore my pants back to front like I was crisscross. I had
Which
long
hasn't
hair.
stopped.
Yeah, it hasn't stopped. I wore too many pairs of Jordans, which also hasn't stopped. I thought I was a little bit of a gangster kid in the western suburbs growing up, listening to too much rap music and thinking I was a part of the rap scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I wasn't. It wasn't a pretty thing. I'm sure I'll give you some photos in the post, and you can pop them up on the screen. There's some terrible photos.
That'll be amazing. Do you remember that first show at UMC? Do you remember the fights?
I remember the main event. I can't remember the main event. You're going to kill me now. Yes, it was at the Sunshine Skating Ring, the roller skating, which is opposite to the West End Market Hotel where Team Ultimate have all their shows. I remember shitting myself. It was a scary night. I just knew, I've been to enough shows to know how it runs. B, I don't want to stuff it up as my first show. I remember being very nervous, but it was done a pretty good job, I thought. And I actually haven't looked back on that for a long time. I have the DVD at home. I should actually grab it. Who was the guy that was the main event? Apologies. I know it was one of the Team Ultimate boys. But I can't remember his name.
And then you've gone on to, obviously, you're our regular MC at Rebellion, but you've gone on to MC a lot of other events you've done. Obviously, Michael Vukovic shows. You've done Evo. You've done Evo overseas. You've done pretty much every show in Australia.
Yeah, I suppose in Perth you got Epic, and Sydney I done PTJ show last month, which was a great day. G'day, Mr. Parnham.
Good show. Terrible bloke.
Terrible. No, the food was amazing. Good show, and not a bad bloke. All right, shit bloke.
Yeah.
Sorry, he kicked me on the table then, Andrew. It's been great. It's and growing up in the sport, like, it's what I've seen since I was, say, 10 in my life. Maybe I was 11 or 12, but to be a part of it now, and to be a part of it, I think, on a positive side, and to promote Muay Thai and to, as an MC, and to have such a passion in the sport, to actually be a part of it every weekend and sit ringside and meet the guys behind the sport and see the differences between, now because I do boxing and MMA and everything else, but to see the differences in Muay Thai between the sportsmen is my favourite thing about Muay Thai. I think it's just a different... I don't think anyone doesn't understand the sport realises what the people within the sport see amongst the camaraderie amongst the fighters and what you see, and I think I'm pretty honoured to be a part of it, actually.
Yeah, no, it's great having you there, and it's you've got a kind of a unique position. I think most people who come to a show see you as the guy who announces the fighters, but for us, once the show gets started, the timing and the rhythm of the show sort of comes down to a lot to do with you, and how you keep the night moving. So your role in it is quite different to what a lot of people expect. There's a lot more to it. Yeah,
I suppose with the local fight shows and promotions, I suppose some people go, oh, you watch UFC and it's all this big thing. But when you're at a fight show and it's a lot more involved. I think the team is so important, the production team with the promoter and everything else. I suppose I'm always the person getting the next fight running out, but there's the people who in the back are bringing the fighters to the side of the stage, and my job to actually make sure they're ready and to announce it and keep the show flowing. And I think that's where I say I do a pretty decent job growing up in the sport and seeing it happen since I was a kid. I love seeing it run smoothly. My Virgo nature hates lateness, just like you hate lateness, but I always seem to only ever be late on your show because I get yelled at the most on your show. Probably the only place I get yelled at doing emceeing. But I really love keeping the show rolling and keeping everyone's attention in the middle of the ring.
What do you find is the biggest difference between the different styles of shows, the energy of the crowd, and also the way the shows are structured and they flow? Obviously, the boxing crowd's quite different to our crowd. The MMA crowds.
Yeah, I think boxing crowds. What I found, a majority of boxing crowds when you go to a bigger show is there for the main event, and the prelim bouts can be really quiet. You can sometimes hear a pin drop, I think, in the prelim bouts. In the main event, everyone's up and Adam and they're also going off. Also, a boxing crowd is normally a later arriving crowd, I think. Sometimes show starts at 7:30. You'll see the crowd rock up at 8:15, 8:30, and sort of to the main event. And again, it culminates to the main event. In Muay Thai, I think everyone comes. It's more of I'm coming to see my friend compete. It's much more of a atmosphere where it's from fight one to main event. It's a pretty awesome crowd. Perfect examples on Roots. Those shows have some of the craziest crowds. Like, it's such a parochial crowd to see their fighters fight, and I think it's just a different. Then MMA is a different crowd again. MMA is a bit of a younger crowd, a bit more of a party crowd. I think it's a crowd that see the fights on pay-per-view TV and they want to come and see what they're going to see in a local fight show. But I think Muay Thai is the most wholesome, friendly crowd where everyone actually is there to see all their fighters fight.
Yeah, and I think we get a lot more at Muay Thai shows. Fighters that are people who are in the audience are also people who train and fight themselves.
Yeah, that's a big call as well. Yeah, 100% correct. I think it also goes because the culture of the sport is shown so much in Muay Thai through the crowd into the ring. Yeah. What's been the biggest fight you've ever been part of that you've sat in the middle and just the energy and the immensity of the fight's just blown you away? In Muay Thai, I done a Challenger finale, so that was pretty awesome. I saw.
So that was the second season of the Contender, I guess.
Yeah, it was called a Challenger Muay Thai at that point, I think. I was lucky enough to be invited to go to Malaysia. It was the IMC bout in the same arena that Muhammad Ali fought in tens of back when he was fighting. Thousands of years ago.
Not the original Muhammad Ali.
That was a pretty awesome experience. Up there with, of course, Nugget was one of the trainers in the show. Mark the Hammer Castanini was one of the commentators. He flew up with me, being in a different country, and then being in this amazing arena with so much nostalgia of what it's had in the past, and then to be standing in the middle of the ring and just knowing that this place was being beamed all over the world except for Australia. It was a pretty awesome experience, and seeing Tum versus Jordan Watson was a cracking fight, and just the money that was involved and the life-changing experience it was a really big night for me as well, and plus my confidence, knowing that I sort of at that time thought, wow, I'm doing okay in this MC gig, and this is a pretty big thing. So that was my biggest moment, I suppose. But doing a Daniel Dawson John Wayne Parr fight a few years ago in Perth was two big names.
Yeah.
On
Pomon's show.
Yeah, on Pomon's show, on the champion show. That was awesome. I've had many. It's hard. In boxing, Lucas Brown versus who was it? ex-big heavyweight from America.
James Toney?
James Toney, yes. Lights Out Tony. That was a massive show at the plenary in Melbourne. That was big in the boxing. Cage fighting, I emceed Daniel Cormier on Extreme MMA back up in Sydney. Yeah, on that same card. Lucas Brown's on that card again, but got to say DC, so it was crazy to call DC in the middle of the ring on the cage. Yeah, I've had some good experiences.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And every Rebellion card has been.
Every Rebellion card.
Every Rebellion card, yeah.
Speaking of Rebellion, Johnny, what's been your favourite fight? Put you on the spot. You've emceed, I don't know, maybe 300-400 fights of mine. So
yeah, I was going to say I've emceed so many of your fights. Probably my favourite fighter to watch was definitely watching Jordan Coe fight. I knew I was watching something special when he made his walk out into the ring, and he's I think changed Rebellion forever. I think he's left a mark on Rebellion. Roy Will Sam Bark was an awesome fight. Always watching the boys in the pit from also the Riddler's gym. Always watching great fight, and because always pitting the good fights against the best from Melbourne. So yeah, I'd say definitely watching. Most of the main events have been awesome in my opinion. Every one of them actually.
Internationally, what's been your most favourite fight?
Internationally,
well, any fights that you've been involved in.
In Muay Thai?
Anything.
In anything. Man, there's so many. I must say, I love watching Kaylee Reese fight up in the epic fight shows. Again, just the nostalgia fights, knowing her history, watching her fight every time in Perth was always awesome to see. And I just like watching in Muay Thai and any sport, two of the best fighting. I didn't have it. It's one of the hardest questions. I think because as you said, I watched so many fights. It's just so hard to choose my absolute favourite, but I'm enjoying a lot of the 1FC stuff at the moment, because again, it's a nostalgia fight. It's like seeing Yotts and Clive back in the ring, Andy Sauer back in the ring. It's just awesome to watch. So it's been a great addition to the landscape of Muay Thai.
It's amazing what's happening with One Championship. I mean, there hasn't been an organisation that's come on board that has signed so many current top-level Thai fighters, like stadium fighters, as well as international fighters. Now, Tyler Hardcastle this weekend, after his last fight with Summerbit on Rebellion, now he's on One Championship. That's getting a tough fight.
That's some sort of, just think, he's on Rebellion, 2 months ago, fought and beat one of the 1FC current top fighters. And I suppose everyone was saying Tyler for 1FC, but how fast it's happened is a credit to 1FC to go, this guy's on a tear, let's bring him in, let's challenge him, and happens this Friday.
Yeah, and it's amazing. And he's now Summerbet's in the top 10 in the WBC rankings. Tyler's now snuck into the top 20. You know, it's the guys, the level is getting higher. I mean, I think for a lot of years we had one or two guys that competed internationally, like, you know, Wayne Parr and stuff. And now we've got guys a lot more getting out. I mean, it's been a bit of a tough start on One Championship. But the guys are in there. They're in there, and we need that.
Yeah.
We need to be exposed to that.
Yeah, it's been a tough start for the Aussies, but I think they'll start shining through. I suppose on the weekend, off topic from Tyler, being at Kings of Combat, watching a bloke like Charlie Bubb fight against a legendary fighter in Vedat H in the K1 scene as his first K1 scene, another Muay Thai fighter stepping out of his realm, stepping up to fight the best, I think one of the best on the planet in K1, and come away with a cracking win.
It's a hard one because the K1 people don't know Charlie Bubb, and Muay Thai people don't necessarily know Vedat. And like, I love Muay Thai, but as much as people don't believe it, I actually really like K1 when done well.
Format.
And Vedat is a guy that I love watching fight. And when he fought Frank Georgie on the last Kings of Combat, that was a great fight. And then when I knew he was coming back, it was like two unknowns fighting each other. One side of the room's, who's this tall, lanky kid from New South Wales?
It was a weird thing. Like, there was people behind me in the audience that were like, who's this guy fighting Vedat? Like, they had no idea. And like, on the social media, all the Muay Thai guys were like, Charlie Bubb's going to be tough for Vedat. And there was those guys saying, Vedat in one round, Vedat's going to knock him out. It's such an easy fight. Go for Bubb. And seeing Charlie Bubb, and it was great seeing Danny Maskachev and Dirty Don Miller in his corner, just giving really, the advice was simple. Keep those head kicks going, keep cracking him in the arm. And just, he was really starting to annoy Vedat. And Vedat was like telling him to come forward, and Charlie Bubb's like, I'm not playing your game. I'm not going to play your game.
I'm a foot taller than you, and I got good kicks.
And for all the kids, watch that fight, because that was just a lesson in how to use your height to an advantage, and to see Charlie just take the word from his corner and just execute it for 5 rounds straight against a world-class striker and a guy who's only been beaten twice by the same man, who's the current glory champion in Cedric Doumbé. Is that how you say his surname?
Yeah.
Doumbé. And he's
You're the man with the good pronunciation.
he's on a roll. Yeah, that's so called. His honour roll goes, I've beaten everyone, lost to the same guy twice, he's a Glory World Champion, and some bloke from Orange, New South Wales called Charlie Bubb. So I think it's going to open doors for Charlie as well.
Yeah,
and it's exciting to have the Aussie guys doing well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that fight highlighted one of the ever-going arguments between Muay Thai people and K1 people in that it showed the effectiveness of kicking the arms, whereas a lot of K1 people sort of always consider that a block.
Yeah.
Whereas in Muay Thai, it's like, well, that's the thing that stops the right hands coming.
By the fifth round, it was Vidat was actually leaning. He just couldn't because he was copping. I reckon he would have copped. I'd love to see the footage again. I'd say 30 to 40 direct kicks straight to that forearm. His forearm would have been a mess the next day. But how tough is Vidat H?
Yeah, he's incredible, and I mean I'm glad he's now back fighting in Melbourne because he used to fight on the A1 Tariq's shows, and now I mean Hisham's getting him out and stuff. That's really exciting because I like watching that guy fight.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff.
So now in the last 10, 12 years that you've been involved with the shows, have you seen the Melbourne fight scene and then across Australia the scene develop as far as fight shows, fighters, the professionalism of it, the production?
I think production's definitely getting better, and I think every state has the promoters that are pushing that envelope. Some promoters are just happy to have a ring, bring in the crowd, have your standard lights on, and just fight.
Yep.
I suppose, and I think there's room in the sport for all different kinds of
100%.
promoters. For me as an MC, I do this, the job's there to be done, and you do the job. And those promoters who just put the ring in and say fight, you need those guys to get the fighters having experience. And it goes through levels, but definitely I think at the top end, it's really hard because I suppose back in the 90s you had people like Tarak and I was watching those shows as a kid, and he was the first probably big promoter that went to like the arenas and put these massive spectacles on, and as a kid growing like, wow, this is amazing. But not every promoter can have those shows, and it's quite crazy. Since that has ended in Melbourne, we've never seen the same level of that sort of massive capacity.
That's the old Christopher Cronus days when Stan the Man used to fight, and you'd go to the glass
Crowning.
house.
Watch the Crowning. I remember back in the day.
There was like 6,000-7,000 people in there, and people don't like.
It was on Channel 10 News on Sports Tonight, and it makes me sad that I suppose it sort of crescendoed back then, and now we're in 2019, and we haven't seen it get to that crazy massive level.
Whereas I think the depth of the fighters and the quality of the fights much higher.
Yeah, the quality of the fighters has gone up. So the quality's gone up to another level. The gyms are so many gyms and so many good gyms who are producing such amazing fighters. Yet the biggest shows that we had back then aren't here anymore. Could be something of budget, I suppose. I'm not sure what it is. That's a promoter's question. But I still think. But now I think there's a lot more good shows in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Where before I think it was just a few shows and you had these massive shows. Now I think a lot of promoters are putting on really good shows, and maybe that's why the crowd numbers are a bit small. But everyone has their niche crowd, so you don't have that massive show anymore.
100%. I think it was that where you'd have 3 or 4 big shows a year. Whereas, I mean, I was talking to the board today, and there's like a weekend coming up where there's, I think, 5 shows in Melbourne alone.
Wow.
And when you get that spread out, it's good and bad.
It does. I think what people don't realise, like, I suppose outside of the fight world, actually run a performing arts school. And when people ask me, do you get many shows? Like, is there that many shows in Melbourne? When you actually try to explain to people that on every weekend in Melbourne, you could have up to 5 shows, and in every format of combat sports, you can have 2 boxing shows. You can have a separate Muay Thai show and a cage fighting show thrown in, and that's just in Victoria, let alone what's happening in Sydney, Queensland, Adelaide. Well, nothing happens in Sydney, but g'day, Andrew. It's not. I think it blows people's minds, like how big the sport is in Victoria alone, let alone Australia, and how many shows each weekend there are.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think it's getting bigger and bigger as there's more licenses being created. Great for me, but it's bigger than people think. The sport's massive in the city. When
you're at the shows, and you've got obviously, I'll be the first one to put my hands up saying I can be a little bit hard to deal with on fight night, but you've got to deal with the promoter, the combat sports board, the referee, the fighters, the support staff, the light and sound crew, the film crew, the audience, when it all gets added up, because you are like, you're the center point of everyone. What's the most challenging thing about that? Obviously, the number of people in your ear, but what do you find really challenging, and what do you find really enjoyable?
I don't find it challenging, as in actually, Chevalier gave me very good advice way back when. It could have been on the show, actually, when I'd done the Call Me A show. He was down there, and I said to him, what's some advice you can give me to not piss off people in the actual industry? How do I, extend my longevity in this industry? And he said, just remember what you're there for. You're there for the fighters, and you're there to make the show for the fighters bigger. You're not the show. You're not the reason people come. You're there to help the fighters be bigger people, and you're pushing them as a main thing. So when I'm at any show, I am literally there to help the show run, make sure the fighters have a good experience in the ring with calling the name out, and I don't get involved in all the politics. I just go to do my work. The crowd's great. I work with everyone. I'm not the video guy, so I never tell the video guy what to do. If it's a video guy, if one of Paris's boys or anyone else's who works in the industry says to me, hey mate, can you move to your left? I go, no problem. I'm not a video guy. If the photographer, William Lou, says, Johnny, move out my way, I don't say, no, I want to stand here because I'm not a photographer. And then in the same regard, because no one tells me how to do my job, I don't tell them how to do their job, and we all work well as a team.
No one tells you how to do your job.
Except for one promoter can get a bit tough. But yeah, I think I just don't get involved in the politics. Like any sport, and with so many people involved, politics is probably the ugliest thing of any sport. Yeah. And I do try to keep away from that as much as possible. Sometimes when you're so involved with so many shows, it's hard to not to. Yeah. But I try my hardest to not get involved in the politics.
I mean, even with all the politics and all the challenges of it aside, when you do show up to a show and you see all the same guys with the light and sound and the official shop, it is like a kind of like a get-together of friends.
Yeah.
And it gets challenging, and we all have our little, butt heads on stuff.
But it is actually a very sometimes I'll see the board more than I see my own family on a week, like during a week, because I see a family. I don't see my family like 3 times a week, but I sometimes see the board 2 days in a row, or in 2 weekends 4 times, and I see like the boys from Paris Productions, or you see the ring card girls, and I actually see these people. So yeah, it does become a bit of a family affair when you rock up. G'day, how's everyone going? And then once that first bell goes, we all get into business mode. And then when the show's over, we see each other next week. It has become a very tight-knit group at ringside, which has worked well for Melbourne. I think Melbourne, out of all the states, has a really good core group of people that work fight shows together. I think we do a great job in Melbourne to make this sport great as a team. If
you could click your fingers and change one thing about that would improve stuff for the industry, let's just say for Melbourne, what do you think that would be? Straight
up, I think just the sport on the news or on newspapers, and actually, I think just supporting the local sport. Like if local media knew how big this sport was in Victoria, or let alone Australia, that little bit of help of exposure and media exposure, and positive media exposure, not negative media exposure. Like, to go for the media, like if someone's committed a crime and 16 years ago they were a boxer or a Muay Thai fighter, the first thing they say is MMA fighter found guilty of, and you look up, like he fought back in 1994, but he's
2 fights,
2 fights at some local underground amateur show, and all of a sudden that's the main thing they say. I just think the media needs to change their ways, and it will help this sport so much, I think, just by growing the sport within our city. Yeah.
I mean, I agree with that. I also think a lot of it, that comes back to how we do things.
Yep.
Because from a promoter's side, one of the things is everyone always says fighters should get paid more, there should be more opportunities, promoters should make more money. But there's a lot of different levels of our industry that I think we can lift the level of professionalism to get that.
Yeah.
But that's a big challenge that's from both sides, because I think we always put it externally, but there's a lot of internal sort of changes we need to make.
I think it goes back to what I was saying before, like a promoter like yourself who has Rebellion, and that you have your core, what you want in Rebellion, and you have what you want to get done. Sometimes your level of thinking is at a point where you need everyone around you to lift to that level, and sometimes it falls a bit short, and it makes you very angry. Because it's hard to soar with eagles when you're surrounded by...
person in the world.
Yeah, but there's that old saying, you want to soar with the eagles, but you're surrounded by turkeys sometimes. There's not a lot of turkeys, but one turkey can make that a lot harder for you to get to that level. But
why do we keep going back to Andrew?
Oh, wow. You guys do like each other, don't you? You are friends. Uncomfortable silence. Yeah. But don't you think, though, the whole fighter should get paid more? That becomes with also sponsorship as well.
Yeah, but it's a circular thing. With sponsorship, you sort of wonder what you can offer a lot of sponsors, and we try to do more and more.
Yep.
But the main sponsors that we get are in our industry are people who are fans and love the sport. So I always say this, people like John and Claudine or Steve Hull and those guys who get involved and put money into our shows, they don't get a direct benefit from it.
No.
So it's not like they get an advertising benefit. There's definitely benefits there, and we're increasing that, but that sort of stuff comes back to us.
That's my point before, though. If media gets on board and actually starts pushing the sport in a positive way and actually starts saying, like, we got some world-class as world champions. We got Aussies now fighting in overseas every weekend. These guys, you wouldn't even know who they are. They could walk down the street on any given day and no one even know who they are.
But I think part of that too, John, I don't know if you agree with this, is the fact that you probably have 10 or 11 world champions in Victoria who've never fought outside of Victoria. No offense.
Yeah, true.
But it dilutes it. You know, you can get a guy and go, Toby Smith's a world champion, so are these 7 guys. And it kind of takes away from, is Toby's world champion the same as that? And then once you get that many, people lose interest. Was when you say this guy is the number one, he's the world champion in tennis, or is the world, I don't know, you're the world. Then it's
actually a really good point.
It has meaning.
I think over the years, that's actually a good point about how things have changed. I think 2008 or even before that, when you went to a fight show and they said they are fighting for the insert letters here world championship, the crowd would be there to watch that. It was a massive thing. Where fast forward now, if you can mention they'll be fighting for the ABCD World Championship, it's like a little, yeah, good. It's just lost. It has lost a bit of nostalgia.
It lost its, yeah. I mean,
Whereas,
Johnny Skeeter told me something that I, really sort of changed my thinking about it. And he said, look, it's not just the name of the belt, it's the guys that fought for it.
Yep.
And I agree with that.
Yep.
But it's just become that thing where there's so many world champions. I mean, we send our info card that you read out at the show and say, put your titles on. But I kind of limit what I want to, because you get the most random, and they're like, I won the blah 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 stadium title in Thailand. It's like, that's not a stadium. That's a pub. That's a pub, or you know.
I played Jenga at that pub.
Yeah. Do you feel like your first fight that you fought in your life in Phuket and you won after a year of training? Do you really think you're a stadium champion? I mean, then how do you put that against a guy like Wayne Parr and stuff?
That actually reminds me back in the day when I worked on Evo. There was always the Evo information sheet for the fighters, which the fighters would fill out, and I'd get to the actual table to do my paperwork, and I got told very quickly, if there's a black Sharpie mark through any information and it makes it on your sheet and you read it out, you're dead. You can imagine who wrote that, who told me. So I'd literally just go, and it was funny, all the title was like black mark, black mark, black mark, black mark, black mark. WMC was okay, it was on there. Back then it was an MTA, but it was like literally very few organisations that Nugget and Josh at the time would let you put on the actual info sheet. So they have a black marker, and they black mark any information they didn't want, and that was their thing, and that's how they ran their show. Speaking of, we can go to that story before. That was one of the most saddest moments of my emceeing life. I emceed the final Evolution, when it was Evolution back then. That was a pretty... Were you there that night?
I wasn't there. I remember where I was sitting. It was one of those times, it's like, do you remember when I was I remember where I was sitting. I remember I was sitting on the couch.
Yeah.
I remember scrolling through Facebook, because I think that was called Evo Stacked. And it had all these crazy fights.
It was crazy.
And it was because people don't realize how big Evo was. Like, all people do, people who've been around for a while remember, and maybe they remember bigger than it was.
Yeah.
Newer people don't get an idea, because they'll come and go, oh, your crowd's big. I'm like, it's 1,200 people. Evo used to get 4,000 or 5,000 people sometimes.
Nuts.
And he was, and when he went away, it was like,
where's Evo? And all these years later, people are still saying where it is. That was, I remember being in the ring, and we're waiting for Dane Daddy Cool to come out, I'm pretty sure, at the time. And...
Yep, did you hear he's making a comeback fight on Rebellion?
No.
we're saying this enough until it happens. So we had a chat with Nugget, and he said it too.
Hashtag pimps. What was the pimps? Hashtag pimps. Pimp life matters.
Yeah.
Pimp life matters. Yes, definitely. Dane Daddy Cool, come back.
One more, Dane.
One more, Dane. One more for the pimp. The hoe train is getting
Triple
shorter.
world title fight, I guarantee.
He was waiting for him to come out, and the music hit, and I'm just sitting there. I'm like, when's he coming out? And then just to see the police come to the ring and say, announce the show's over, and I was like, nah, can't do that. And they said, the show's done. Tell everyone to leave. And I'm like, not until I get told by the boss it's done. I'm not saying anything. And I look over, and there's Nugget going, oh, damn, that was one of the shittiest nights, just to get so excited for the show and then just sit there for the next 3 hours waiting for anything else to happen. It was a pretty sad night for the sport. Very sad night for sport. But who knows, it could come back one day.
Yeah, it'll be great.
With Dane Daddy Cool.
No, he's having his retirement fight on Rebellion because he never had a proper retirement fight.
Dane Daddy Cool's commentator.
He'll fight. If I beg enough. He'll fight.
Rebellion 25, I think it's going to be.
One of the hardest things ever for me was the first FedEx Eliminator. We had an 8-man.
Oh, wow.
And Daddy Cool wasn't available. He was going to fight on Total Carnage in Queensland. And right before his fight fell through, and Soren called me up and he goes, Daddy Cool's available. And I'm like, look, I've got my 8.
Yep.
Someone might fall out, but I'll bring you guys out, weigh in, and he can be an alternate.
Yes, I remember how sick that was.
And as a promoter, you never want injuries.
But you were hoping.
But it's the one time. It's the one time.
I remember that night.
And he weighed in, and he was in the back with his hands wrapped, and everybody fought, which is great. Nobody got badly hurt.
That first knockout was pretty bad in the first round.
There was some bad knockouts.
There was some bad. Anthony Foy's knockout that night was.
That was the second one.
Second.
That was the second FedEx Eliminator. That was the 70-kilo one where he knocked out Milad Faza.
That was a cracking knockout.
And then one of the best fights ever
The main event. Yeah,
between Reese and Anthony. And that was a challenging night where the lights went out because we were at the entertainment center, exhibition center, and we didn't have anything to do with production.
That were peeking through the little parts that you had, and
that was one of those shows where I think that was a real turning point for me, where I just went
positive or a negative.
In a positive, in a way, where I don't freak out anywhere near as what I used to. And people say it now because we get like main events falling through because of injury, 2 weeks out. Flights, visas getting lost, but it's just I've just kind of gone. I remember that night that happened, and I just went, "There's nothing I can do about this." I went and sat ringside with a couple of the people who were volunteering, and I actually watched the fights and enjoyed it. And I remember one of the girls that worked for FedEx, the poor thing in a dress, crawling underneath the ring, trying to get the lights going.
To find the switch. Actually, speaking of you at ringside as working with promoters, I think you actually are one of the only promoters that I reckon actually promote fights. I've said this many times that you want to watch. You don't necessarily care about the crowd.
My accountant hates that.
You're like, you know what would be a great idea if I have a guy that I really like fighting from Queensland who has no friends in Melbourne fighting a bloke from Holland that I'll fly down to fight because they'll be a cracking fight to watch. And I've seen you many times at ringside just sitting there enjoying this fight and going, I'm probably the only person that knows both these guys personally and want to watch this fight, but you're one of the only promoters that actually puts on fights that you would personally like to watch and go, you know what, I'm like this crazy professor, I'm going to put this together and watch and enjoy this fight.
It's become a bit like that. Thanks for saying that, Johnny. And
you're welcome.
Number one, it's fights I want to watch.
Yeah.
Number two, it's fights that I'm not 100% sure about the result because I don't want to set people up. And number three, as much as I back certain Andrew Parnhams and Dons, and then my close group of friends like Tom and Will and Benny and Pete and stuff, there's that litmus test. What are those words?
Litmus.
Is that if I match up a fight, I don't ever want him to go, oh, really?
Yeah.
You know, like sometimes they don't know, they don't necessarily know the matchup and they get surprised. But I don't ever want to do something where they're like, I can't believe you matched that. That's just like an easy bullshit
But over
fight.
the years, you would agree that I think it's become that organic crowd that Rebellion's built, where people don't necessarily come now to Rebellion shows and watch their best friend fight or a gym fight. Now people go, Rebellion's on, we're going to have these fights. Let's go and watch some really good Muay Thai.
And that's
I
been
think
very rewarding.
Taken a lot of time and money and crowds and headaches from you to create that environment, but it's an environment that people now will pay to come and watch Rebellion and not just the person fighting. So I think that's credit to yourself there. And,
Thank you. We didn't set this up. All right, Johnny.
Sorry, hang on. Andrew, you're still shit.
Before we wrap up, I'm going to throw some names at you. I want you to, this isn't a stitch-up job. I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind.
One-word answers?
No, you can use many words.
I'm only good at one-word answers. and I'll badly pronounce them as well.
No. All right. Paul Demicoli.
A really interesting operator who's also my brother, who has an amazing likability with everyone in the industry across the entire universe that he's met.
Mr. Nugget.
Pretty much Paul. No. Nugget, such an amazing thinker. When you look at Nugget and you might hear about stories like Nugget, you'll never think of the knowledge this guy has. And when he gets on a tear about Muay Thai or the sport or about life, that guy has some really great things to say and really good at giving advice. And I think he's loved worldwide in the Muay Thai industry. So credit to the sport. There you go.
Great. Now the godfather of Victorian kickboxing and Muay Thai, Mr. Johnny Skeeter.
Nothing but a legend and pioneer. This guy has been doing shows for 25 plus years, could be more. And his format that he has just works. Like, he's never had a show that's not full. He's got a great fan base, and he does probably more shows a year than any other promoter in Melbourne.
Yeah. Your other brother, Joe Demicoli.
Joey, again, very, very good matchmaker in Melbourne. Like, one of the last people who just does kickboxing shows and now has kickboxing, K1 and boxing shows. But Joey just knows how to get two guys into a ring who are going to, A, put on a really exciting fight, and B, sell tickets and actually fill a venue. And Joey has a great format of actually getting fighters together. Michael
Vuka.
Yes, these guys are all like the actual... Vuka, thankful for that, like, number one, for giving me the chance all those years ago and keeping me on his shows.
He's a legend, and he gives a lot of people a lot of
He
stars,
does.
and he's a very unappreciated man.
Actually, Vuka and Johnny Sheeta are so similar in their ways, and they are stalwarts in this industry. These are guys that once you have their trust, you've got them for life, and they've got you for life. And if you don't break that, they don't change their formats unless it has to be. Vuka is someone I can call up at the drop of a hat and ask advice, and Vuka will always have the time to give me advice. And I've rang him a few times for advice over the years on the journey, and definitely a person that I can trust.
There's stuff he's told me when I first started promoting that I still use all the time.
Well, this is like even for yourself. Like, we're pretty much, I'm a bit older than you, but we're in the industry at the same time. And I think, as you mentioned, those last three people, I suppose especially Vukovic and Sheeta, are two people that I've always turned to in time of advice required. Like, what should I do in this scenario? What should I do in this scenario? Vuka and Sheeta are two people that I've always gone to ever since day one, and I've been blessed to have my brother Joe and Paul also can call up. But I think Vukovic and Johnny have been two people that I can say I've asked heaps of questions to, and they're two people that have always given me the right advice.
The Reeses, Kelly and the Riddler.
Man, I've known Darren since I was a wee little young boy. Back in the days of Team Ultimate when he trained there, back in the early 90s. Just an amazing couple with an amazing family, and Epic has just become an amazing promotion. One that I've worked on for a long, long time, but recently, and change your dates, Darren and Kaylee, because they just keep doubling up with Melbourne fight shows that I work here in Melbourne, and I haven't done one of their fight shows in a long time. I can't wait.
If it's on a day ending with Y, there's a show in Melbourne, so it's hard to avoid.
It's true. It's so hard. Like, people go to me, "Oh, do you love working interstate?" And I do love going interstate. But if there's a show in Melbourne on the same night, it's after these years, I'm like, you know what, I would like to be in Melbourne instead of flying out. As you know, when you fly out, it's a big weekend, and when you get your own business, I run my own business, and it's hard to get away for 2 days to get the show. So I love doing interstate shows, but if there's a show in Melbourne, I like being at it. But back to Darren and Kaylee, both awesome people, and Kaylee forged her way through as a fighter and was I think by far one of the best female Muay Thai fighters I've ever had in this country, an absolute legend. And now as a matchmaker and a promoter, she's doing an equally cracking job. And they look after their fighters so well, from the back to the front. They're always for their fighters.
Just two more.
Two more?
The Hammer, Mark Castanini.
I can just repeat well, Hammer's become not more than a promoter. He's a mate now. Like, I went to his engagement. G'day. Hammer.
Sick of seeing your face.
Fair enough. Man, Hammer, as a promoter, I've been working with him for years. And with him and Dom now, we're such good friends. We're in Sydney together for the Australian Muaythai Awards, only in January. And yeah, just become not more than a promoter. He's a really good, I consider him one of my friends outside of the industry. We have your people you work with and you have your mates, and Hammer's definitely a mate that I call a friend.
And finally, one of the guys that we're both friends with, and a lot of people in the Muay Thai and fight industry don't.
We're both friends with. No,
Muay Thai and fight industry don't know
So
every other side to him.
Yeah.
Hisham, he's a guy I'm quite good friends with, and I really got a lot of time for Hish.
Hisham, again, he's still, you got the K1. He's got his shows he has.
Doing more boxing now as well.
Yeah, I suppose his management. He's got Kane Clark as a great boxer. He's getting through the ranks. He's got Hunter. Hisham's a really good operator in the way that he is meticulous in what he does. He knows what he wants. He's got a really strong team of people around him. He's got Naz, who works really close by with him on the night, getting things done. He's actually a person who still puts on those big fights as main event fights. Like, so on the weekend you had Charlie Bub fighting Vedat H. You had Vedat H versus Frankie George in his last show. He's worked this fighting industry for how many years now? He's been doing it for years, and he's still putting on strong shows. His shows are really good. He's got good backing with guys at Ultra Tune and stuff. He's got the Fox Sports behind him. Really good guy, and someone that is he's a different character. But he's a guy that once you meet Hisham, he's a genuinely nice bloke, and he'll do anything for you. If you're one of his friends, he will move hell and high water for you as a mate. And I also was at his wedding. I emceed his. Did you know I emceed his wedding?
No.
I ruined it. I was the worst.
I have no doubt. Started late.
Ray Demicoli. He was one of his groomsmen or best man. He could have been on the night, and I stuffed up his name when I called him out. Ray Demicoli still calls me Michael, or whatever he goes, Mr. Michael, how are you? Warren, how you doing? Perfect. Because it hasn't changed since the day where I ruined. If I could have dug a hole, it was at a beautiful place on South Yarra, and I've ruined the entry of all the actual groomsmen and best man and stuff. And I'm standing up on this lectern, looking around the room, going, I can't believe I have just stuffed up such an important part of a wedding. And it happened to be Hisham's wedding, so not one of my better moments. But yes, I'm a professional fight MC, not a wedding MC.
Who's the one fighter you're looking forward to seeing fight more, and it's really captured your attention? A young up-and-coming fighter, or someone who's middle of their career? Who are you looking forward to seeing fight more over the years coming?
Tyler Hardcastle. I've been touting that kid to you since he was a wee 17-year-old, I think. Albert Tua, another fighter who I think is amazing. Van Fan, fought on Rebellion last show. That was one of the most... I think that was a show that the mid-range fight, I think, pretty much beat everything else on the night. That was exciting as... I think we're in a good place in Melbourne, in Australia. Queensland, and I'd love to see Melbourne do what Queensland have done and let more 17-year-olds and 16-year-olds fight more and do more, because it's amazing to go there and see these guys fighting. I think moving forward we're in an amazing spot, and there's so many awesome, like Alma Januku, another fighter who is 18. I think she's 18 now, turning 19 soon. This kid is already world-class, top of her game, and she's only a baby. Like, we've got some crazy fighters in this country in Muay Thai who I think Australia will take another step over the next 10 years. It's going to be awesome. Awesome.
And finally, coming up, you've got your heavyweights of hip-hop coming up.
Yes.
Some maybe fight people don't know.
Yeah, I actually run a urban dance championship at the Melbourne Pavilion. It's in July 28th, Sunday. It became an idea. A lot of my kids at my dance school that me and my wife run compete in hip-hop dance comps around Australia. It's a bit like fight promoting. Every single one I went to, except for a couple that stood out, were in little local halls where they charge your kids registration, and the kids came along and they danced on the just flat floor with normal lighting, and it was like the kids were used to that till they're done. So I thought, how about we do something a bit more class and a bit more excitement? So I created this new event with a good friend of mine, Anna Singleton, and heavyweights was born. So instead of giving him trophies, we give him title belts. I tried to mould the two worlds I'm from, which is the dance world and the fight world, and yeah, it's great. First year we only had like probably 20 crews compete, where last year we had 41 crews compete.
It's awesome.
It's like 500 competitors, and like it's a really awesome night. It's really good. 500
competitors sounds like my next route show.
Yeah. It'll be a 55 fight card. It's all 3x2, so it shouldn't go too long. Straight up, let's go fight after fight.
Fight after fight.
Fight after fight. Shout out to Hisham.
Awesome. All right, Johnny, thanks so much for coming down today to the lovely Ziggy's Eatery.
Yes.
We've sat across this table a few times before.
Minus the burger today, though.
Minus the burger.
I've got no mayonnaise dripping down my top for the first time.
And you're on the health kick at the moment, so
yes.
Let's just consider this a push along.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Johnny. Really appreciate it, and I look forward to working with you a lot more in the near future.
Pleasure. I can't wait. Thank you.
Cheers, man.
Thanks a lot.